Hey everybody, welcome to Process Palooza. I'm Sean Monroe. I am a manager of our UC San Diego Lean Bench, and I'm also the service owner for Quality Build here at UCSD. Happy to be here today, talking to all of you. Seeing the participants list just fills up, makes me smile. Just some quick housekeeping. We are recording today's session. It will be posted later on and available for all of you to go back and review and go over again. Because of the size of this webinar, we are doing Q&A through the Q&A panel down at the bottom. I personally like very interactive presentations. I like talking with people and letting them interrupt me whenever they want with question and answers. But what we're going to do is leave a good healthy amount of time at the end of today's session where we could jump on and go over all of the questions that come up. So don't be hesitant to put them in the Q&A. If you see other questions you like, make sure to upvote them. Those are the ones that we're going to prioritize getting to. And my promise to you guys, I will get to all the questions that we have some participants behind the scenes typing in answers. Anything that's not answered via text during the session we'll get to after the session. We left a lot of time, and I promise to spend time over if anybody else has some extra time as we go into the lunch hour to get your questions answered. With that, I'll go ahead and get started and dive right into it. I have a lot of information for you guys. I'm trying to shove into a very limited amount of time. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So today we're going to be talking about automating your process the easy way. Of course, that starts with the very basic principle of understanding the process, right? It seems pretty basic, but a lot of times we want to jump to solutions. And I always try to stress, right? It's the Lean Six Sigma experience in me that going back to define the process and really kind of take those measurements and do everything else before you get into that improved stage. So I really try to stress all the basics of, really start at the beginning, right? Understand that process. First step in understanding the process, identify the subject matter experts. These are the people that know that process. I'll probably switch back and forth to referring to them as SMEs. That's the common terminology, but subject matter experts, the SMEs, are really the people that are gonna be doing that process day in and day out. The process owners as well are part of this group, and it's everybody that you're going to refer to when you have any questions on the process. This is the group that you want to start with, and it'll usually grow over time. So don't be worried about having to have exactly everybody that's involved with the process completely correctly identified right up front. But it is important to do some key pieces of that SME subject matter expert identification up front. To me, it's really getting with the sponsor of the project. Doesn't have to be super formal. There's a lot of small, quick moving projects, but it's really the person that's going to make that ultimate decision to enact improvements on that process at the end. You want to make sure you identify the subject matter experts that are important to them. What we found is doing that up front eliminates any kind of having to do rework at the end when they say, oh, well, did you talk to this person over here? And if you somehow miss them through the process review and really understanding the process, then you have to go back, and no one likes rework. So we try to get them involved early. Get their buy-in on who the subject matter experts are. But as I go into the next step, we often identify other subject matter experts that come into play later on. So that brings me to the next point. After you get those subject matter experts, how do you get that knowledge of the process out of their head? That's really when we jump into map the process. I really like this image for map the process because I know there's all kinds of different ways to do this. I've seen all kinds of successful different variations on mapping the process. My favorite way to do it was really get into a room with the whiteboard and just start writing on the board. And it looked pretty much just like this, but I would write on the whiteboard. Of course, with COVID, that all kind of changed and we had to adopt different ways. If you've been along the ride for Process Palooza, you might have seen some of the tools that we've employed to help us with this in the virtual environment, things like Lucid Charts, Lucid Spark, and we're really making a lot of use of ProMaps as well here on campus. But it's really the concept of getting that process out of people's heads and onto something visual where everybody could really step back and look at it. And like I said, what happens a lot of times is when you're doing that mapping the process, you'll get people saying, oh yeah, didn't I just send it over to this area? They do some stuff and send it back to me, right? It's one process box. And this is where you discover a lot more of those SMEs as you go through the mapping of these processes. That's when you start finding out, oh, wait, there's a whole nother person in this process. And you go ask them, oh, what's your little box? And of course, that expands to 5 or 10 more boxes as you talk through it. But it's really good to get that full scope of the process, right? You define those endpoints, start points and endpoints, and then you really want to get every single action within that process mapped out in a visual way. I can't tell you how many times when just sitting in the room with subject matter experts, kind of mapping out processes, and you put it up on a wall where people can see it and they start sitting back and having little light bulbs go off to themselves, like, oh, why do I do this multiple times? How can I go back and change that right away, right? And they start questioning it. So it's really good to get that up onto a visual platform of some sort and to have everybody review it and really understand all of the different pieces of that process. So this is key. Every process that I'm personally engaged with to review and help out facilitate improvements to, this is my starting point. Subject matter experts, get in a room, let's map the process how it is now before we could even start thinking about how do we make it better. So all important parts of really kind of getting started with process improvement, especially when you're talking about automating and making that process a lot better. Next step, everybody's favorite, you jump in to improve the process. I will notate for all my Lean Six Sigma friends out there, of course, there's measurements and really kind of diving into a lot of the data behind the process that's involved in the kind of in-between phase. But then we jump into, what are those improvements that we want to see? Very first is engage with those subject matter experts, those same people that are doing the process every day and know the process in and out. They're going to be able to tell you pain points right up front. It's great to use that resource to say, what are the parts you don't like doing or that are a problem to you? I love that first question that you don't like doing, because some people might be like, oh, no, it's just part of the process. But when you say, what parts of it don't you like, they'll usually start getting into some of the waste pieces, right? Some of the, oh, I move stuff from one spreadsheet to another, and then I put it into this system. I don't like that. It's just part of the process. So they might not instantly think of it as a pain point, but they won't like it. So I like that question a lot too. You get a lot of those good information nuggets right up front from these groups when you start asking questions in a different way, I found. So just some tips and tricks. And a lot of times though, like I said, they'll be attached to that process, and because they're doing it every day, they might not see all of the pieces that could be improved. So I always go back to the Tim Woods, right? Identify waste. So what are the different types of waste? And Lean Six Sigma originally came from very factory-oriented work. So a lot of them started that way. So if you look at the waste, sometimes I've noticed that it's hard for people to translate, but what does this actually mean when I'm working at a university and I'm in a business office? What is this type of waste, right? Transportation. I'm not, moving a widget from one machine to another in a factory. Transportation might not matter, but transportation is really about moving items around. One of the best things is if you think about emails, right? You're moving work pieces from department to department. Even worse than emails is if there's still paper processes, right? You're moving that from area to area. So it translates pretty well. Inventory, items or information that customer has not received. So I always just, in my mind, it doesn't apply necessarily in the virtual world, but there's definitely a lot of virtual forms of this, is I just kind of go to that big stack of to-dos on a desk somewhere, right? Waiting in somebody's desk inbox. But it's very similar to, email inbox. You have this big set of inventory, work in progress that's kind of coming through the university factory, if you will. Motion is when people are moving within the workspace. So this is inventory is stack up and over processing, over production. You get into like more of things moving. Motion, you're talking about people moving. So to me, I always think of this in an office setting of a person going to multiple systems to get all of the information to make one decision, right? You're doing all kinds of motion just to complete one piece of work. Waiting, of course, we have a lot of this all over the place. This is one of the most common things. Things are getting batched. They're sitting in a bucket somewhere waiting for things to happen to them, waiting for information to arrive and items to arrive. A lot of waiting in a lot of our processes at the university. Over processing is really kind of where you go. You do too much, right? You do more to a work process than needs to be done. Overproduction is doing the work before it's needed, or kind of doing too much of something, doing stuff that's not asked. Think of those reports that are produced and all kinds of effort put into it, and it's not even needed, right? No one even uses them. Defects are the worst because it's the rework, right? It's you might have to redo something that came through all of these different waste cycles, right? You might have had a process that has a lot of motion, a lot of waiting, and then you get to the end and you realize there's something wrong with it and it has to start all over again. So defects, rework are huge time and Lean Six Sigma process waste, because it usually involves any other waste that was in the process before the defect and as far back as you need to go to fix that defect. Skills, so I have to say skills is a newer one. When I first was doing Lean Six Sigma, it was kind of a just becoming part of the Tim Wood. It became Tim Woods, right? The nomenclature to just remember waste. But to me, it kind of is a little bit separate, because this is a huge thing to me. Skills, right? Not using workers to their fullest of abilities. And it's really all of these things in front of skills is part of what waste skills, right? If we're thinking of somebody working at their desk and they have to go, move stuff from one spreadsheet to another, they have to do all of these other processes, that really takes away from their value add, right? We want this picture, right? We want academic advisors sitting in their office, advising students, talking to students, making sure they're doing the right thing. We want our researchers in the lab doing that research. We don't want them sitting at their desk moving, touching any of those kind of waste parts in a process. We want to eliminate as much of that as possible, so we could redeploy that time that they're using for that process waste and redeploy it to more valuable add time that's really going to utilize their skills to the fullest, right? Really get them that value add of why they're here on campus and what their job is on campus. So I love this picture when I think of skills. This is like the epitome of that, especially here at campus, right? Students are our mission, and how do we empower our staff to really go back and utilize those skills? So it's all of that waste reduction leads to improvement of people adding value through their skills. So these are all the things in a process that I always have in the back of my head. Whenever people are telling me process steps, I'm always, focused on these waste parts and where does it apply in this process and how can we fix that, right? We have these big process maps and we go through a lot of iterations that we're fixing different pieces of the process, and what are these kind of parts that stand out to me. But I did say iterate improvements. Big thing for me. There's all kinds of different improvements in a process that could happen, and they don't have to be, a waterfall where they all come at once. I mentioned earlier, and I kind of made up my own term for this, which I call micro wins. These are the type of things where people are really in that process mapping meeting, and they're looking at this process map that you are building for their process, and they're saying, well, wait, why do I do this 3 different times? Or why do I move this information from here to here if I'm just going to put it back over here, right? So many of that, so much of that happens. I see these light bulbs go off all the time in these process mapping meetings, and all kinds of other process review meetings with people. And there's a lot of stuff that people can go back to their desk, go back to their job and make those improvements right away. Right? It doesn't show up in a process review later on, or your measurements, but it's stuff that people are injecting back into their process and making it better right away. So I love those, the micro wins that we don't want to wait for all of these other pieces of improvement to come along. If it's something that can be done right away, empower the staff to do that right away. right? Those improvements. And then we have all the way through to the other side of the spectrum. I labeled it as custom solution. These are these ones where the process needs support, it needs empowerment in itself, right? It might be something that's going through email and we really need a way to track and make it visible, automate pieces of it. And some of times our solutions, we need to customize them. We need to create something that, you know, there is no product for. There's takes a lot of resources and a lot of manpower to get to that solution. And it's usually not just get to that solution, it's a lot of times maintain that solution. So we see a lot of you know, continued support of that, which makes it these kind of big improvements. And where we've, or me personally, have always had a gap in what I think we could do with process improvement is kind of this middle part, right? It's where do we go between these, you know, micro wins and these custom solutions? And there's a lot of times where you have both, right? You have these needs for these big custom things, and if the volume and the throughput of that process really supports the need for it, you definitely go out and do those custom solutions. But to me, when I think about iterating improvements, I'm always kind of focused in this middle part. What are these things that we could do, right? These low-hanging fruit that we could add a lot of value with minimal input. So that takes me to improving process improvement, right? How do we go back to this waste and think about where do we have waste in our own process improvement? I'm a big fan of, you know, all the things that all the past Lean Six Sigma people have talked about, and I definitely apply it to myself. So I'm always looking at how do I improve the way I'm helping improve processes. So I see a lot of these pieces in some of the process improvement work that we're doing, right? Motion, waiting, over processing, overproduction, right? Not using skills. So I see a lot of this in the process improvement. So I'm constantly trying to, you know, fix that as well. So when I think about identifying waste within process improvement, I have a case study that I want to go through with everybody here today and kind of show, this one's kind of near and dear to my heart. It's something I actually worked on a lot here at UCSD, and I noticed a lot of these. That case study is looking at grad student researchers and specifically hiring grad student researchers. So this is my picture of grad student researchers here at UCSD. Grad student researchers are grad students that are starting to transition into employment within labs of some of our researchers. So they're just starting a transition from a student to an employee. They might have been employees before, but they're really kind of getting their job within that lab. And how do we actually get them hired on within that lab? So this is something that, you know, followed my own process, met with the SMEs. We did a lot of process mapping. This is a nice version. I know you all can't see it. I'll change that right now, but this is a nice version of, it actually took us a lot of work to get to this version, right? We did a lot of process improvement, just things that did not need technical solutions, right? Just straightening out how we do it across different areas of campus and kind of working together and discussing the process and bringing everybody together to talk about how do we hire grad student researchers? And this is kind of what it looks like, right? If I was to simplify this view, identify need to hire or rehire a grad student researcher, we have to check the funding source that's going to pay for that student. A lot of times it's coming from different kind of grants that are part of that lab. So we want to make sure it's allowable. We want to make sure the end dates are correct. We want to make sure there's enough money left. So there's a whole fund source check. And we also have a student eligibility check. Their students, do they have enough credits? Do they have the right GPA? Are they doing other things that might affect how much they're getting paid? And we need to take that into account when we hire them. We have the HR eligibility. Of course, there's a lot of stuff that goes in there. That's all the hire paperwork. That's, you know, if they do need work visas, other things, that all happens in this HR eligibility. And then we have a system entry and verification piece. So we did a lot of work, and we talked about all the improvements. We did a lot of just pure process improvements that didn't need support of a system. But we also realized with the sponsorship of this project that we need something to support this. It was going through email. There's different support tools for it, right? We're using different sheets and being able to kind of gather information in different areas. But we were really kind of stuck because if you look at this, right, financial information, student eligibility or student information, and HR information, all very, sensitive data that you do not want leaked. You have to be very careful with. So there was a lot of look into this, and a lot of the tools that we looked at didn't really support us being able to just do something easily to support this process. Make it visible, make it so everybody could easily track, make it secure, make it so not everybody could see different pieces of information, right? Really secure the data in sensitive ways. And we looked at a lot of solutions, and we decided we needed one of those custom solutions, right? The big dog on the right side of that previous picture. So we put it into our project hopper for our IT team to really have the resources available. This is my visualization of a project hopper. This is more of a Lean Six Sigma project hopper, but to me, I think Lean Six Sigma, but it's like if you imagine the IT version of this, where there's a lot of projects waiting to be done, and they kind of get filtered down, and eventually as the resources become available, because there's always more projects than you have resources, as they get prioritized and you go through them, it really kind of doesn't happen. So we had a lot of waiting while we were waiting for this process to get done. And we were really kind of looking for a solution that's in the middle. So it was this gray area that we didn't have before. We had some easy but simple solutions. These are really nice. They don't require engineers. They're very inexpensive, but they don't meet all the business requirements. These ones definitely have a place. If you could use those right out of the box for processes and support stuff, I've done a lot of process improvements where we were good with just that, and it was great. We could move on. Complex but powerful requires an engineer. So it requires this expertise, right, that you have to have resourcing for. They're expensive, and if you're customizing it, you can meet every single business requirement, but we were missing this middle piece, this easy and powerful, doesn't require an engineer, reasonable expense, and meets most of the business requirements. So it can get us a long way to our process improvement. That's where we were able to discover recently here on campus, Quality Build. And to go on with this case study, just kind of reminding you guys of this process map, right? We had it in a hopper, we're waiting for the IT resources, and we were waiting and waiting, right? We had a lot of other very important projects going on as well that those IT resources were working on, and we just were not able to get to it. So we actually did a demo of Quality Build where we were able to say, here's pieces of data that we need, and we were able to put that into this form, which really helped us automate it. So I'll get to the automation piece in just a minute, but it really started off with how Quality Build works. You have a form up front where you're getting the basic information that you need to get started on the work on that process. This was, of course, hiring grad students, so it's the initial request. Who's the student? Who's hiring them? Where's the funds coming from? But we also have a lot of other sections of information, payroll information, student eligibility check information, that we don't want available to everybody, right? We don't want it right up front. So the cool thing with this is we were able to put those into sections and really kind of control those in different ways that only certain people in the workflows were able to see. And the workflow. So this is the Quality Build workflow. This was a snapshot directly from that application within Quality Build. And I put this here because I like the look of it. It looks a lot to me like a process map. This is how my mind thinks in process maps. And we were able to put all the pieces from the process map directly into this workflow. And the great thing about this is not a workflow that somebody's saying, okay, I got this approval, now I need to send it out to this email address to make sure this person approves this piece. This is something that the system's doing. So the system actually has all these approval boxes, and it also has all these notification boxes that are going out. So we're able to put our process into this tool that is, self-service. You don't need to have any kind of specialized training or coding ability to do it. And we were able to put that process in there and really kind of watch it flow through, which was nice. So we started saying, what other kind of processes can we put in here, right? What is the basic anatomy of most of our university processes, right? You have a need arise. So we find out something needs to happen. You gather some information around that. This could happen at multiple steps, like I showed in the last process, but these are the basic building blocks, if you would, of any process. And then you have a formalized request. You have some notifications that go out to different people that might be involved. Hey, this is happening. You have some approvals that happen, and then you have execution of it. So looking at kind of what we're able to do in sample form with Quality Build, we were able to go out and say, we could probably use this tool to automate a lot of our processes. And so far, I'll just caveat this with, we're very in the early stages of utilizing Quality Build here at UCSD. We've had it on campus for about a year now. And I became a service owner later last year, but also still wearing a lot of hats. So it's something that we're, making sure to thoroughly look at and roll it out in the right way across campus. What we've used it for is a lot of COVID related things that come up and we need solutions right away. And then we're starting to dive more into our process improvement and where can we better support different areas of campus. So really excited to get started, but so far we've had some great success stories. Fall 2020, we had a petition to change grade option from a letter to pass, no pass. This was a big application. It had 5,000 requests within the first week, and it had about 8,000 last time I looked. This was something that came to us that we were able to put together this application and roll it out with the approvals within a week and a half. So we were really excited about that one. Our research and on-site activity reporting platform, this is one of our very first that went out. This was all in response to COVID. We had a lot of great researchers trying to get back into their labs right away, a lot of them to do COVID-related research. So we wanted to empower them, and it was something that we created right away to get out there so our researchers can put in requests and support those requests with all of their data of why they need to get back in the labs and how they were going to support all the safety procedures. And as those changed, we were able to support the updating of those requests and how that was all processed. So it was great there. Summer Engineering Institute, I love the student-facing ones. This is something we just did. It was another tool that we had for years on campus, and we were running out of ways to support it. It was an older tool. It was developed a long time ago. So we started with Quality Build, and we really redeveloped the capabilities within Quality Build and completely changed and did process improvement on how that old tool worked and was hard to update, and really kind of modernized our process of working with students to have them apply it to these applications. Our return to on-site work for staff, very similar to the research, but as we started bringing staff back on, we use Quality Build for the same thing. We had all of our applications go through there. We had thousands of applications do that. Degree plan approval, I love this one. This is one where no one's actually submitting forms or filling out forms. It all is outsourced from another application. They outsourced their workflow directly into Quality Build. So via API, we're bringing API information out, sending API, or we're bringing API information in, sending API information out, and Quality Build is the workflow engine of another application. So it not only saved us processing time from the approvals perspective, but also from the application development perspective, that system administrator didn't have to develop the workflow within their tool. Then our remote work compliance, I like this one. It was a lot of departments that were doing their own process. we were able to get everybody together in a room and build out a tool within Quality Build that really worked for everybody. So we took these 3 separated process with a lot of rework happening, a lot of people having to submit the same information to multiple departments. I'm talking about like IT, our export control, and our HR groups, including some of our sponsored project offices when it was research related. We put them all into one application, one process, right? One area. There's a lot less rework. Everything's in one location, so things aren't getting emailed all over the place, right? No transportation issues, motion issues. So some really great success stories that we've had just so far in our short career with Quality Build. With that, I tried to go through it all really quickly. I know there's going to be a lot of questions. I know there's going to be a lot of interest. What I wanted to roll out to all of our UCSD staff that are here on the call today is the ability to get your hands on the tool. So we do have a UCSD Sandbox where you can create an application, a Sandbox application, and take it for a test drive, right? And really kind of see if it fits your needs for processes that you might have in your area. So offering kind of the first time ever here on campus as we continue to roll Quality Build out, an ability for everybody to get their hands on it. So if you would like a Sandbox in Quality Build to play with the tool, I'll give you a bunch of links on how to do it. I'm happy to meet with people and go over all the steps, but you could email qualitybuild@ucsd.edu. That creates a service ticket. Or if you prefer to just go into the service portal, you can go into the service portal and create a service ticket. I will get you access to the Sandbox and get you a Sandbox application set up where you can go wild and really test and get your hands and feel Quality Build. For all of our non-UCSD university friends on the call, I want to introduce Katie. I brought her along. Katie is from Quality Build, but I told her about my offer of Sandbox all the UCSD employees, and she wanted to definitely do the same for non-UCSD employees. So I will turn it over to Katie and let her give you a little bit more on that piece of it.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So like Sean said, we do have a free trial Sandbox, a 30-day trial Sandbox as well, if you're on the call and you're not currently with UCSD. If you want to learn more about Build, go ahead and go to build.quali.co. And there's a ton of information you can find there, a ton of resources, and a lot more explanation around how you could use Build for your own campus as well.
Cool. And with that, like I promised in the beginning of the meeting, we will have some Q&A. I left quite a bit of time. I lost control of my PowerPoint. Here we go. So Q&A. With that, we have Moshe Kanamini as well from UCSD. I'll let her introduce herself, and she's going to be our Q&A face here for the call today.
Thank you, Sean. That was a great presentation. I learned a lot. And yes, we do have some, and my name is Moshe Kanamini. I work for IT services in the capacity of process management and continuous improvement. Always very excited to hear about process improvement methods and tools and what we roll out on campus. So I'll try to group some of these questions together. Great questions have come in. And some of them are related to the process that you described, like involving subject matter experts. How do you make sure all the voices are heard? Sometimes we have some shy SMEs. What is your technique?
So I like to do small groups. Usually when I start process, if they're a big process and I know there's going to be a lot of pieces to it, I like to engage SMEs, subject matter experts, more one-on-one if I can. Get them into the room, hear their portion of it, go on to the next and hear their portion of it, and then get everybody together. I feel like that really helps. But if there doesn't always work out that way, of course. That's like ideal world. Sometimes we have a lot of people in the room, and I personally will just call on people. That's kind of what I found works, right? If I notice someone really hasn't said a lot, or a lot of times you can kind of see faces where people want to say stuff. So I'll just make sure to ask them, how does it work in your area? Or what are your experiences with this? I feel like asking people, I go back when I'm doing that process mapping, I'm constantly going back to people and asking, do I have everything? Did I portray it right? Is there anything missing? That's the biggest piece to me, is missing. Because a lot of times through the process of process mapping, you'll come back and perfect wording and get everything else right. But if it's missing, it can get overlooked. So I try to talk through step by step, you know, are these your steps? Does this represent it? Is there anything missing? A lot of times that will trigger other pieces where say, oh, I missed this whole piece. So I like to really kind of push and just ask people, make them talk if you would, and just make sure we have the full picture.
I've seen you do that. You do it very nicely. So we have a question here that says, well, you know, it's really nice that you went through the process, and if you had all of the resources and the ideal scenario, you would get to current state, then ideal state, and map it all out. Sometimes we have a software solution that comes in and it's difficult to get to the true ideal state. That's what the question is asking. How do you deal with those kinds of situations where you do have a software solution that's competing with possibly your ideal state?
Those are hard ones. They really are, because I come from a Lean Six Sigma background, right? It's always DMAIC. It's always start with the basics and really, you know, take your time to go through and solve the problem the right way, or usually end up solving it again later on, right? If you don't get to the root causes of the problem, and you just are solving symptoms, the root causes usually pop up in different symptoms, right? It's very much like health. I think of, when I say it, it makes me think of health, but I've seen it a lot in the process world as well. So it's hard for me to say, oh yeah, you know, don't take that time. But I agree. I've been in a lot of those scenarios where, you know, it's just not practical. You talk about waste of over processing and doing too much for processes. So if the process doesn't, you know, warrant the amount of time, then it's hard to do that. So you have to iterate. I think that's where that iteration comes into play. I think you go into it with, in the software world, right, MVP, minimal viable product. And a lot of times with that, you'll get that feedback. But the important part is to continue listening to that feedback and continuing to refine. So you might not get it right at the very beginning, but keeping your ears open and going back and taking that new information into account, you're able to get to a ideal state eventually, right? It's that continuous improvement that we all talk about.
Good point, good point. And I know we've rolled out a lot of enterprise systems. We looked at a lot of business processes across our campus. Sometimes we did have the tool identified, sometimes we didn't, and we still went through the processes for coming up with the ideal state regardless.
Companies like Toyota, right, that have been doing Lean Six Sigma process improvement for years and years and years still say they're nowhere near where they want to be, right? It truly is continuous improvement. You've got to keep going back and refining.
Absolutely. Okay, another one about the process mapping, and then we have some about quality build and the tool that you showed. So at the beginning of the process mapping, do you start just blank slate, whiteboard from scratch? Or do you gather some info first through questionnaires, et cetera, draft something, have a starting point?
It's a bit of both. I don't ever draft anything, but I love getting my hands and trying to organize not organize myself, but you know, learn as much about the process myself as I can. But I do start from scratch when I get in there with the subject matter experts. I like to go through all of the information so I could help ask the right questions, because I'm really just a facilitator. So it prepares me to ask the right questions. But a lot of times, you know, a process will be published and what actually happens in real life is very different. So I don't like to start with anything. I like to consume as much of it as possible, go into the room with as much knowledge as I can, but then really let the subject matter experts tell me what's actually happening. I love to go watch it as well, right? And it's the Gemba walk. You go out there and you actually observe the process. All of that, I think, is very important.
Absolutely. All right, here's some around the GSR tool that you showed, graduate student researcher. first of all, is Quali available for staff for hiring GSRs? So that's one of the questions, the form that you showed.
Yes, so that form has not been pushed out widely across campus or widely adopted. It is something that's been worked on. I'm happy to get back into that one. As I've showed, most of the ones launched in Quali Build right now are a lot of COVID related things that were fast moving, the need arose really quickly. So yes, it is something that is mostly built out and ready to be finished and launched. So if staff are interested, happy to show that to everybody and go over it with anybody that might be doing that in their day jobs. And in Quali Build, yes, I did show the Sandbox environment. So if you would like to get into Quali Build, take it for a test run, don't hesitate to send an email or put in a service ticket.
Okay, so if folks are specifically interested in the GSR form that you showed, you're saying they should email qualibuild@ucsd.edu to
Correct.
get it to the next level? Okay, and that was Quali Build tool was used to create that GSR pop-up. Okay, great.
And like anything else, there's a lot more that could be done to make that version of it even better.
All right, let me see. Katie, you might want to jump in to answer some of these other questions. So it says, are any other UCs using Quali Build to automate their processes?
Currently, UC San Diego is the main UC campus using Quali Build, though Quali has been around as an organization working with higher education specifically for over 15 years. So we do have other UC campuses working with some of our other products, such as our research or financial suite.
Okay, fantastic. All right, Sean, there's a question around who do you think might be customers, users within UCSD who are maybe might not be benefiting from Quali Build yet, who aren't using it yet, who would be good, target areas?
I think there is a lot of those areas. Like I said, we're very much just scratching the surface of what we could do with Quali Build. We have targeted some communities very carefully because we want to be very careful of how we roll out Quali Build, and we want to set it up for success. Our first target community of users actually putting apps in are developers of other custom applications. So we started really kind of going to these customers who are creating custom applications and saying, here's another tool for your tool belt that, when you get these requests for applications, if it meets all these Quali Build building blocks, and you could do it in Quali Build and save a lot of your time up front and save a lot of your future support time for infrastructure and everything else that goes into creating an application, here's Quali Build. And we've been working with that community to really, develop tools, get their feedback, do a lot of lessons learned, and iterate how we roll out Quali Build and how we let everybody use it. So this is kind of the first public forum where we're really starting to announce Quali Build. So kind of very excited to get started. That's why I wanted to make the Sandbox available for any users, and we'll eventually be fully open for business, I'll call it. And we will be out there engaging with a lot more communities across campus, because as you can see, I'm really excited that it's so universal. And I truly believe I've been asking for something that would do all the things that Quali Build does for a long time. So I'm excited to get my hands on it and go out and really help improve a lot of processes with it.
All right, sounds like you're going to have your work cut out looking at the Quali Build mailbox once you're off this session.
I'm excited.
Okay, I'm going to jump over to some questions about the tools that we use for process mapping and interactive. So on remote facilitation for process mapping workshops, what have you seen? What have you used yourself? What has worked for you?
All of the tools that we have on campus that I think we've adopted all work great in different scenarios. So just to kind of give that list again, we use Lucid charts. I keep wanting to say Lucid Maps, Lucid charts. I came from a heavy Visio background, so I gravitated to that, and I could usually do those on the fly really easy. So it kind of replaced the whiteboarding for me. But we also have Lucid Spark, which is very much like a whiteboard. If you guys have seen the demo of it, so it's really nice. You have like sticky notes that participants can put in, and it's really nice for more collaboration style of process mapping. And then ProMaps is great as well. We're doing a lot. ProMaps is really great because users could start putting their own process maps in there without having to have a huge process mapping background. So all three of those in the virtual world have really been a lifesaver, I'll say, as we've converted from my tried and true go-to of getting in front of a whiteboard.
Yeah, those are good. I've also seen just standard Zoom whiteboarding going on. We've seen Microsoft. I put a link in the answered questions and answers for some of the tools that UC San Diego uses for virtual whiteboarding. And but you could always use a shared notebook, a shared Google Drive. You could use Visio and send it around. I mean, there's
Excel, PowerPoint.
Right.
I agree. I think any way you could do it. Just
yes.
As long as you're getting it out of people's head and visualized.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Here's some questions. And again, Katie, you might want to jump in for some of these, tag team with Sean. So let's see. Well, first of all, is there some kind of checklist to determine if Quali Build is a good fit for some of the solutions we want to come up with?
Yeah, Sean, I'll jump in, but I'm curious to hear your perspective on this as well, as you've evaluated different tools for what you were looking for. We have, if you go to the build.quali.co website, we have a buying guide that walks through when you're looking for what would be called a no-code application development tool or a forms and workflow tool like Quali Build. The buying guide walks through 5 different steps that we recommend considering. And a lot of them actually talk through kind of what Sean discussed today, which is be really clear about the problem you're trying to solve. And while I am a marketer, I will genuinely say the tool is not the answer. The tool is a part of the process in finding the answer. One of the other things that we talk about in that buying guide is every campus has a portfolio of solutions. And I think one of the things that I really liked in Sean's presentation is that you already have tools on campus you can use, but they likely might not solve the exact needs you are looking to solve. So that buying guide walks through the process that we recommend thinking about when you're looking for tools and specific things that we would suggest looking for as you're trying to solve what I would say that sweet spot of between finding something that's easy enough for someone on campus to use, but powerful enough that it actually solves some of the complex processes you're trying to automate. Sean, anything else you would add there?
I agree with that. Like we have a lot of other tools on campus that could be the right solution for certain problems. So we definitely don't want to try to fit something into Quali Build that doesn't fit. There's all kinds of different tools that could be used, but I've found, I know it's referred to as no code. I like to refer to it as like self-service. I think that to me is the biggest kind of selling point, because we really have people that haven't interacted with the tool be able to pick it up really quickly and control their own business processes and configurations within there. I think that, to me, that's the kind of biggest point with Quali Build, is you don't have to put in a ticket to change the wording on some questions that are going out, right? It's less than no code. It's easy, right? You don't have to be a master user to do it. So I think that's what I've seen as far as selection, but we do have a whole suite of tools, even here at UCSD, that we use every day for different things.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and just to name some of those, so we have Docusign for certain purposes, we have Qualtrics, we have, even Google, yeah.
Google Sheets, we have ServiceNow, there's
yes.
Salesforce around, we're a very diverse campus.
Yeah, but it's a great idea to put together kind of a checklist, like if you're trying to do this, go over here. So that would fit into the ecosystem that Katie mentioned.
Yeah, Sean, you can speak to this, but one of the things that I think is different about Quali Build versus a lot of campuses have like a Docusign is Docusign is really good for point end-to-end processes that are simple with not a lot of people involved. When you start getting a little bit more complex, eSign tools begin to break down in the level of their ability to support. And I think they're not as agile as a tool where you can move it from one process to another. But Sean, feel free to jump in on that, on your experience looking for the right tool set for UC San Diego.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's my biggest thing is someone asked me, Quality Build or Docusign, does it have a lot of workflow, and do you want the form to look exactly one way? People think of Docusign as they want someone to be able to sign the PDF and it has to look exactly like this. I think that's where it would be Docusign versus we need a signature, but we have this workflow and here's the set of data that we need signed off on. Then Quality Build is probably a better pick there, especially if it has a lot of workflow. Right, those approvals, those notifications that have to go out, all of those different pieces.
There are a couple questions here about integration, Quality Build's integration with other tools or systems. So I believe somewhere along the line, Sean, you mentioned that you integrated Quality Build with some of the other systems. Can you kind of walk through that? Is it difficult? Is it hard? Is it an API? What does that entail?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. This is the question that comes up all the time, right? Everybody's favorite is how do we integrate it? So out of the box, can we bring data into Quality Build? Absolutely. If it's available via API out on campus, we're able to connect to those APIs and do a lot of really fun stuff with those APIs. So we set that up on the administrative side, meaning the connection to the API, the authentication, all of the kind of more complex piece. And then the end users really just have a smart gadget on their form building where they're able to just say, okay, here's the information I want to display in that smart gadget. For instance, we did the whole connection to Tririga here on campus. That's our space tool for buildings and such. And users can simply drag and drop a smart gadget and say, I want to display every building. And whenever they open that dropdown, that's all the buildings that are in Tririga at that point in time, right? If you go change it in Tririga, you could re-hit that dropdown and it's a new call. So we could bring data in via API. We could also send data out via API. So if we need to send data to other systems, we could do that at different parts in the workflow. Other systems can also pull data from Quality Build via GraphQL interfaces. We can download it via Excel. So there's a lot of ways to get data in and out, but we've been really happy so far with the integration ability and the way to do that.
I remember using the form that I had to pick the location where I'm working because we're trying to keep track of who's coming on campus. And so, yeah, I remember having to pick the building and the room, and it was really easy, just popped up. Katie, it says, let's see, can you name other integration and any well-known tools or systems that Quality integrates with?
So Quality has a really, and Sean, one of the questions I think asked how difficult in your opinion were integrations to build, but Quality has a very open and accessible integration platform where anything with a RESTful API you can build an integration with. We also have the ability using either a pre-built middleware platform or middleware that an IT department would help build, where you can move information from one system to another. So pretty much anything that you have on your campus that you'd like to integrate with, whether that's your research administration system, your student information system, all of that can integrate with Quality Build. And like Sean said, can be either pulled in as data access when someone submits a form, or can be used even in long-term reporting. So if you pulled an integration and had it as part of the form, you could export that out into a Tableau. And any of the information that's made available as part of that form can also be put out as metadata that you can report on later.
I'm kind of laughing too, because I have a process improvement background. I think we could tell from the presentation, and I became the service owner for Quality Build and was able to set up all these APIs. So it's pretty easy even from the admin side, because I had never done anything like that before and was able to stumble my way through the first few ones, but now I could set them up no problem.
I can say I did it as well, so I'll echo that.
Great. Time check here. I know Sean mentioned and warned us that we might go a little over than the published time, and we have, just to make sure we answer all questions. I think we'll be finishing these last few questions right on time. So Sean, Katie, I think we've gotten most of the questions answered. Any other last points you want to jump in with?
I know one of the questions that was asked was, what are some of the competitors, or what are some of the differentiation points of Quali versus some of the competitors? So I just want to speak to that really briefly. I will be honest, I've been in this market for my entire career. And one of the things that I think is challenging is that there's a lot of tools that do things similar to this. So it's hard. One of the things I find is challenging when someone goes to find a tool like Quali Build is knowing where to start. There's a lot of good resources and information out there from analyst firms that I'd recommend. But I would say specifically, if you're looking, and Sean, feel free to jump in, for a tool that of what Quali Build provides, I would look at the enterprise development application platforms. That's the space in no code that does something similar to what Quali Build does. And there's a few that I would mention, Nintex, Mendex, Betty Blocks, there's a variety of them, that those ones are listed specifically on the Magic Quadrant. But I find the challenging thing in what a lot of tools like that end up getting to, and Sean spoke to it earlier, is that there's so many features that are put into those tools that they can become inaccessible for someone that's not technical. So if you're really looking for a tool that's easy to use and agile, that's, I would say, where Quali Build comes in. Still powerful. You can do all the things from integrations and accessibility across campus, but you can provide it to someone that doesn't know what a term API is and never needs to know what a term API is, and still can do the things in terms of automating processes that you actually need. The other challenge I feel like in the tools nowadays is a lot of pricing models are usage-based pricing models, which can be really challenging for institutions. And so our pricing model, we call it an adoption-based pricing model, because the goal of it is you can have unlimited forms and unlimited submissions and still use the product as much as you can on campus. And so go to our website, build.quali.co, if you're interested in learning some more.
Thanks, Katie. And yes, I just want to reiterate, somebody was asking, is this recorded? And yes, it is. This presentation, this entire presentation and conversation is recorded and will be put on the processpalooza.ucsd.edu website, and you'll get a notification. It will be next week, and it will be available starting next week, midweek or so.
Awesome. Thank you all for your time. Hope everybody got one piece of information somewhere in there, tips and tricks that'll help make processes better.
Thank you. Take care.